Hello, and thanks for tuning into this video. Today I want to talk about an organ that many of us, and maybe even you, wish we were born without. I know the appendix probably came to mind when I said that, but I'm actually going to talk about the gallbladder. The reason I introduce the gallbladder this way is we typically associate it with pain, and we're generally not aware of the benefits that can be achieved when the gallbladder is healthy. For example, if you were to be diagnosed with gallstones or another form of gallbladder disease, your doctor is very likely to suggest its removal. So let's talk about what the gallbladder is. The gallbladder is a muscular sac that is approximately 3 inches long and about 1.5 inches wide. The name has two parts. The first is gall, which means bitter or bile, and the second part is bladder, which generally means a membranous sac for holding air or liquid. And in this case, it holds liquid, which is, of course, the bile produced by the liver. The gallbladder connects to the liver and duodenum via bile ducts. And I'll go into detail about that in just a minute. But first, let's talk about the location of the gallbladder in the body. The picture on the right of the screen here gives you a rough idea of the gallbladder's relationship to the liver and stomach. And as you can see in this next picture, the gallbladder resides behind the lower portion of the liver. It's about the same level as the lowest rib on the right side of the abdomen. So now that we know where it is located in the body, let's talk about some of the things we should know about the gallbladder. I put this list together because there are some things that I think are important aspects of the gallbladder. What's the function of a healthy gallbladder, and what are some of the symptoms that a person experiences when they're having gallbladder issues? And what I think is really important is what can be done to avoid gallbladder issues in the first place so that you don't have to have your gallbladder removed. But if you do have your gallbladder removed, what are some of the complications you might face? And once it's out, what are some of the supplementation and dietary recommendations for maintaining optimal health? This last bullet represents a big question in my mind because so many doctors in the United States today are recommending gallbladder surgery or cholecystectomy to address abdominal pain or digestive issues. While I was doing my research, I learned that over 600,000 cholecystectomies take place in our country every year. I believe this number seems high, and it tells me that our medical community doesn't think the gallbladder is very important. But as I will discuss later, you will see that my opinion is it's a very important organ, especially when it's functioning properly. So the function of a healthy gallbladder is to actively assist with digestion and absorption, which means the gallbladder collects and concentrates bile to then release it at the appropriate time so that it can break down fats and assist with the absorption of important nutrients. One interesting fact is that 80% of the bile produced by the liver happens during the fasting state. It makes me wonder, where does the bile go when there is no gallbladder? The short answer is it often results in diarrhea, but I'll discuss this more later. The second bullet on this slide refers to a capability that I think is very important. It speaks to the fact that the mucosa in the gallbladder has the greatest absorptive power per unit of any structure in the body. This means that it's able to remove water from the bile that's produced by the liver. This is important because doctors in the United States seem to think that the bile doesn't need to be concentrated in order to effectively break down fats. And it makes me question, why does the gallbladder have that capability? And why do so many people have problems after their gallbladders are removed? The last point about a healthy gallbladder that I want to make is that it delivers concentrated bile into the duodenum in response to a meal. When food leaves the stomach and enters the small intestine, the contents of that food activates the release of a hormone called cholecystokinin. The abbreviation for that hormone is CCK. And CCK is a very important regulator for the digestive process. It simultaneously stimulates the pancreas to secrete digestive enzymes, the gallbladder to contract and release bile, the stomach to stop allowing food into the small intestine, and the brain to tell the body it's no longer hungry. That brings us to the question of bile. What is it, and what is it for? So what is bile? Bile is a green to yellowish brown fluid that, as we've discussed, is ejected from the gallbladder in response to fat-containing food as it leaves the stomach. It's produced continuously by the liver from cholesterol, water, bilirubin, and bile salts, and I underline the word continuously because it's an important concept that I'll address later. Bile is required for the metabolism of fats and fat-soluble vitamins. It acts as signaling molecules that activate receptors that are involved in lipid, glucose, and energy metabolism, and it has a role in the T4 to T3 conversion for thyroid function. Bile also serves as a lubricant in the colon, as well as a deodorant when you poop. All of these things show you just how important the bile is to your digestion, and once it's used in the digestive process in the small intestine, it's reabsorbed into your ileum and returned to your liver. This is a process called enterohepatic circulation. Having this circulation work appropriately helps you avoid issues with your gallbladder that I will discuss next. The symptoms of gallbladder issues can range from non-painful malabsorption to severe pain. In some cases, gallbladder issues can be life-threatening. Some of the symptoms are nausea, vomiting, fever, chills, diarrhea, unusual stools, and pain after eating. The symptom pain can be localized to the upper right abdomen. It can radiate into other areas of the body, including the back, chest, and shoulder, or it can radiate from the front of the rib cage to the back. A symptom that's difficult to detect at times is the malabsorption of fats, fat-soluble vitamins, and minerals. These malabsorption symptoms can be happening without awareness of the other symptoms. Now, I've mentioned many of the symptoms associated with gallbladder disease, but it's important to keep in mind that diseased gallbladders can be life-threatening. As I mentioned previously, I believe many doctors in the U.S. tend to be too quick to recommend removal of the gallbladder. However, there are situations where a cholecystectomy makes sense. This is by no means an exhaustive list that I've got on this slide, but it lists a few examples. Repeated contractions of gallbladders that contain gallstones can promote thickening and scarring of the gallbladder wall. This can cause incomplete or insufficient ejection of bile, which can lead to permanent dysfunction. There are times when testing such as ultrasound or HIDA scans detect problems with the gallbladder, biliary duct, and or the pancreatic duct that can only be resolved with surgery. Another reason doctors recommend removal is as a treatment for acute pancreatitis brought on by gallbladder disease. So if you've ever known anyone that was experiencing gallbladder symptoms, and I'm sure you have, you also know that the pain can be really severe. So let's talk about some of the things that can be done to avoid these kind of problems. Do an internet search on gallbladder health, and you'll see that there is an overwhelming amount of information out there. I tried it, and I got 2.9 million hits. The problem is much of this information isn't credible, and very little of it talks about prevention. In some cases, this information can be dangerous. For example, if you have gallstones and follow the instructions for a gallbladder flush, it can not only be dangerous, but potentially life-threatening. Let's talk about some of the things you can do for prevention. As you can imagine, in order to have a healthy digestive system, you need to eat a healthy diet. My research found that a diet that is healthy for the gallbladder and liver is comprised of bitter foods, plenty of fresh green vegetables, and nutritional herbs. The list on the right side of this slide will give you an idea of some of the foods that can benefit the gallbladder. And here, this list on the slide gives you an idea of the nutritional herbs that aid in healthy digestion. And so now that we've covered some of the foods we should be eating, let's take a look at the do's and don'ts of gallbladder health. You should drink 8 to 10 8-ounce glasses of water per day to keep your gallbladder healthy. It's also important to eat foods containing healthy fats and foods that are high in vitamin C. Wild-caught fish and pasture-raised meats are a good source of healthy fats, and Strawberries are a great source of vitamin C. As with any healthy dietary recommendations, I suggest eating large quantities of fresh vegetables every day and to include fermented foods as well. Something many of us don't think about is the importance of determining what your food allergies are and if you are intolerant to gluten. If you eat foods that cause inflammation anywhere in your body, it is very likely that they will affect the performance of your liver and your gallbladder. So have a test conducted if you suspect food allergies and even sensitivities. I've also listed being tested for underactive thyroid if you suspect you have thyroid issues, because low thyroid function can be associated with low gallbladder functioning as well as low bile flow. These conditions have been shown to contribute to the formation of gallstones. Finally, the last do on the list is to exercise regularly. Even a moderate amount of exercise can significantly reduce the risk of gallstones by reducing the amount of cholesterol in the bile. Now that we've spent some time on the do's, let's talk about the don'ts. Eating low-fat diets and diets high in refined and chemically altered trans fats such as safflower, sunflower, and corn oils increase the risk of gallstones. I will go into more depth in low-fat diets on the next slide. Research also shows that eating high carbohydrate diets can result in gallstone formation. The same can be said for eating foods with added sugars like sucrose and high fructose corn syrup. And that really goes against all the information that you've probably heard in the past about diets. And now for the tough one. Consuming alcohol in excess leads to fatty liver, which results in unhealthy bile production that leads to bile sludge. I haven't talked about bile sludge, but this is a precursor to gallstones, and it should be considered just as problematic. There's also evidence that rapid weight loss will result in the formation of gallstones. The good news here is there are studies showing that increasing dietary fat and or the use of ursodeoxycholic acid, also known as UDCA, can prevent or reduce the formation of gallstones during rapid weight loss. As promised, here are some of the things to think about if you are considering low or no fat diets as a way to avoid or reverse gallbladder dysfunction. I mentioned earlier that one of the functions of the gallbladder is to concentrate bile, and that in order for that bile to be released into the small intestine, it must be triggered by the intake of fat. Without that fat trigger, the concentrated bile just sits in the gallbladder and ultimately starts to form gallstones. I ran across an article in 1989. Well, it wasn't me in 1989, but an article from 1989 in the Archives of Internal Medicine that found low-calorie, low-fat diets led to gallstone formation in 25% of participants. High-carb diets also present risk. In an article from the BMJ Journal, a study found that high carb intake increased the risk of symptomatic gallstones in men. These studies have been around for some time, but we still seem to be receiving the same advice from the medical community that low-fat, high-carbohydrate diets are good for our health. As you can see, a diet full of healthy fats equal an active, clean gallbladder, and a diet void of healthy fats equal quite the opposite. I've been discussing the gallbladder from a keeping it healthy perspective, but what happens when it needs to come out, or if it's already out? If you're facing a cholecystectomy, here are some potential complications you should consider. Most people experience diarrhea immediately following surgery, and for some it may be long-term and even permanent. Bloating, cholesterol imbalance, and a reduced ability to absorb fat-soluble vitamins are other common complications. As you can see by this list on the bottom of the slide, fat-soluble vitamins are very important to your health. Another complication after a cholecystectomy is the reduced ability to break down fat. This means that you are more likely to be deficient in the essential omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Fats also include vital nutrients which act as antioxidants and anti-inflammatories, like lycopene, lutein, and carotenoids. There's also a reduced ability to remove toxins. One of the risks of having a cholecystectomy is the potential for damage to the bile ducts or the liver during surgery. The surgeon could also miss stones that have already collected in the bile duct. This is called post-cholecystectomy syndrome, and it affects between 5 and 25% of patients depending on the material or references you're reading. Additionally, without a gallbladder, stones can develop elsewhere in the body, and there is an increased risk of developing fatty liver or liver cysts. We could spend a lot more time in this area because of the complexity of the digestive process and all of the possibilities, but I want to touch on one issue that rarely gets discussed, which is the effect that gallbladder removal has on our microbiome. Microbiome has become a new buzzword in the health community lately, and for good reason. Over the last few years, a lot of study on the microbiome has uncovered that a healthy microbiome is key to overall digestion, healthy immune response, among other things. And really, I think we've just scratched the surface on the benefits of a healthy microbiome. This slide refers to a study that shows cholecystectomies affect the intestinal microbiota composition negatively. Once the gallbladder has been removed, bile continuously flows directly into the duodenum, which, if I didn't mention it before, is the first roughly 12 inches of your small intestine. And it does this without storage or concentration. And this is what causes that change in composition. And studies have shown that this composition change in the microbiota leads to an increased risk of colorectal cancer. To me, and probably you as well, this is a scary concept. So, without a gallbladder, it's more important than ever to have good eating habits and the necessary supplementation to ensure our bodies, even at the cellular level, are staying healthy. Therefore, let's talk about some of the dietary and supplementation recommendations for those living without gallbladders. Similar to the overabundance of information on the internet regarding gallbladders in general, dietary and supplementation recommendations are plentiful and often very contradictory. The next slide provides some recommendations, but this is an area where it's very important to work with a certified nutrition professional who is able to monitor lab results and suggest the best approach for optimal health. The first thing to note here is the foods that are recommended to maintain healthy status after a cholecystectomy is the same list for maintaining healthy gallbladder and liver function that you saw earlier, which clearly illustrates the correlation of good nutrition and healthy digestion. According to the authors of the book, Save Your Gallbladder Naturally and What to Do If You've Already Lost It, taking an ox bile supplement is the most important thing you can do after you've had your gallbladder removed. The thought here is that without your gallbladder, you are unable to break down fats properly. Adding ox bile supplementation to your diet will help with that. While taking ox bile is a good recommendation, you need to make sure that the fats you are consuming are healthy. For example, wild-caught fish, avocados, and olive oil. Additionally, adding bitter and sour foods to your diet will help stimulate your digestive system in preparation for food intake. It's also a good idea to understand your individual food allergies and sensitivities, as they can greatly impact your digestive system, similar to what I mentioned earlier. Another recommendation from the book mentioned above is to add selenium and NAC to your diet to increase your liver's ability to produce glutathione for detoxification. Detoxification is important for removing things like mercury and acetaminophen, and without proper amounts of glutathione, an amino acid also known as the master antioxidant, the body is unable to remove such toxins. The great thing about all of these recommendations is that your nutrition professional can actually measure your progress against a baseline and assist with any necessary changes. Now, if you are lucky enough to still have your gallbladder but are experiencing gallbladder issues, there are some non-surgical ways to avoid surgery. On this slide, I've listed 3 different types of non-surgical treatment options for gallbladder-related issues, but They are only treating the symptoms and not the root cause. Also, each of these have limitations and risks associated with them and won't do anything about prevention without a lifestyle change. So I'm not going to go into the detail of all of these non-surgical treatment options because I recommend that making a significant nutritional lifestyle change is the best path for your health. So, in conclusion, the bottom line here is food matters. And the food that we put into our body is as important as the information that we put into our mind. There is no reason to wait until you experience pain to make better food choices. We all know that staying hydrated and eating large amounts of healthy fruits and vegetables is a standard recommendation for good health. But it isn't a cure-all if you continue to eat processed foods, added sugars, and trans fats. Whether you have your gallbladder or not, diet is important for good digestive health. Look, I know it's not easy. There's a ton of information out there that is confusing and in some cases downright wrong. All you have to do is turn on the TV or jump on the internet and you'll be inundated with commercials pushing products that sound good but aren't. So do yourself a favor and don't do it alone. Team up with a health and wellness professional. It will not only help you make the right nutritional decisions, but can help to ensure your digestive tract, with or without a gallbladder, gets healthy. Thank you for tuning in. It's really been a pleasure sharing with you all the information that I've been learning about the gallbladder.